Good evening, everyone. I'm just going to give about 2 minutes to let the room fill up. But we are here. I'm just going to be on mute and we're just going to have to deal with some awkward silence for a few minutes. Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the follow-up R meeting that we are kicking off really at this point to release some of the final draft material for the R1. Just some kind of parameters for how we're going to do this tonight. We're trying to be sensitive to the fact that this is a citywide platform. And we really want to hear what everybody has to say, but we want to do it in a way that's as democratic as possible. So tonight we are asking you to utilize the Q&A box. At the end of the presentation, our community consultant will be reading those Q&As and we'll be answering them. We will not be, in other words, we will not be promoting anybody to speak this evening. You will have ample opportunity to speak on the presentation and the actual draft a little bit more privately with us at a later point where we will, of course, make ourselves available. With all that said, I'm going to share my screen and start the. Liz, you're raising your hand.
Yes, we have one question. It just says, can you email the list of R1 suggestions at the beginning of the meeting so we can take the notes as we follow along?
So let me start the presentation so I can kind of go through some of the timelines on things. Liz, you're so good at this. You're right on top of it. Hang on. Share screen. Guys. Okay, just some background so everybody kind of knows where we are. We can orient ourselves in the same place. Early this year in 2002, we adopted our master plan. The master plan process was about 2 years long. From that master plan, we got a little over 150, 160 recommendations. Those were generalized to map changes, policy changes, and zoning text changes. We have been ongoing studying them to bring changes to you in phases. Phase 1 was recently approved in the fall, and it really focused on taking the areas that were historically unzoned commercial within the 60s, 70s, and 80s, zoned residential instead, and rezoning them to commercial corridors. Now we are kind of kicking off into our phase 2. And before we started this, we did have some kind of preliminary meetings about the R1 and the phase 2. Up on the screen in front of you right now is just the list of the meetings that we had. We had specific more-centric meetings about about R1 with the generalized suggestions that the master plan we're making for the R1. Today is our first, I'd say, kind of hard R1 meeting where we will be presenting the final comments. No, I'm sorry, the final comments, the actual proposed zoning, and hoping that you will take the time to review it and make comments on it. Let me walk through the timeline with you, just so you have an idea. So obviously tonight is that first meeting. We will release the official amendments on February 6th, which is this upcoming Monday. So tonight, we're going to go through highlights with you. We're going to try to bring up some of the things that we carried over from those meetings and some of those things that we didn't. But the actual verbiage will be released on our portal and on our website February 6th for you to upload and to comment on. At the end of this presentation, we're going to do a little bit of a primer on how you can review those materials and how you can provide comments. The comment period will last all the way up until March 10th. And then we will take all of your comments and re-release a final draft March 27th. I did add in there is a mid-March meeting that will be specific for the Communipaw Avenue rezoning. We will not be talking about that tonight. That meeting, that follow-up meeting, which we don't have a finalized date yet for, but it would be in mid-March, will be about that. And then basically based on the comments that we get back from the final draft, by April 15th, we will have the final version. And the intention is for the first planning board hearing to be April 25th. And then after that, there's 2 council meetings. And so what we're looking at ideally is an adoption by June 14th. Some of the things that we're going to be talking about tonight, we are suggesting more map changes, some rezoning of areas that we saw were not necessarily R1. We're going to be talking about the bulk standards. Some of those bulk standards are things that we talked about in those other meetings. We're going to be talking about the commercial, historic commercial, and we're going to be talking about the design standards, height standards, subdivisions. We're eventually going to get to historic preservation and large lot zoning, parking standards, and then I'm going to show you how to go through the reviews. I know all of this seems like a lot right now, but I promise you, going through the flow of it, it won't seem so bad. I do encourage you, as things come up, to use the Q&A box to type in your questions. You are allowed to vote questions that have already been answered. If it's a question that you feel like you wanted to ask, you can raise the level of importance for it. But I am going to say the chat box is being monitored, so please, no bad language. So some of the map changes that are going to be made. The first was a request that we had from the McGinley Square CID, which is to create a restaurant overlay zone for the McGinley Square area. We're taking the R1A and the R1F. If you're familiar with those, a while ago, we created zoning that was kind of what we call historic preservation light. A lot of those lots were larger, and in an attempt to disincentivize subdivision and demolition, we created a larger lot zoning. And moving forward, like we have in the previous phase, we're really trying to create a zoning system that flows a little bit more logically. If you've heard me say before, right now it's like we have R1, R2, well, we had, right? R1, R2, R3, R4, and R5, and they almost didn't have the kind of logical flow that you thought they would. You would have thought that R5 would have been the highest. But we fixed all that when we really took a look into the residential commercial zones. Now we have the R1, RC1, RC2, and RC3. We're looking to kind of do the same with R so that there's more of a logical flow. So the large lot zoning will be RH1, and there'll be another large lot zoning that we're creating that's a little bit different, RH2. Now, anything that was R1A or R1F will be RH1. There is a district in Webster Avenue that was formerly a redevelopment plan that became regular conventional zoning that we renamed at the time as a placeholder, R1W. We're looking to move it to R2. This is still a conversation that we need to have a little bit more with the Heights community to flesh that out. I think some of the bigger ones that we're looking at too, and this is part of the Communipore conversation, is to create varying levels of neighborhood commercial. So the NC1, NC2, and NC3. The majority of things, if not all of the things right now that are NC, will be NC1. The rezoning of the commercial automotive along Communipore, that will be NC2. And the zones that are CBD, commercial business district, or OR, office residential, will be NC3. CBD and OR are basically remnants of the 2000 zoning that were eventually became a Journal Square 2060 redevelopment plan. So if you're looking at a map today and you're looking for the CBD and the OR zoning, you're seeing very small spots throughout the entire city. So what we're trying to do is really kind of combine them. They are very similar. They're both 10 stories. They're both they're both mixed use. They're both no density. So it doesn't make sense to have two different zones. So instead, we're going to group them into, again, that more, logical thing of the NC3. So some of the things that we talked about, some of the things that we didn't. We did say that we were going to remove the height table. Right now, the R1 zone has a height that's done by floor to ceiling heights, and it's a chart. So it'll say that you can have something as high as 35, and then if you have a floor to ceiling height that's 12 feet, you can go as high as 44, which means that you can have a 44-foot building in probably primarily a 30 to 35-foot high block. And what that has created is really an issue, well, a variety of issues, but what it's created for us primarily is a legal issue, which is that if the applicant, if the person who is proposing a building that is 44 feet high, but 4 stories, it doesn't meet the threshold of a zoning board application. It's a C variance instead of a D variance. And that's because the way the MLUL reads is that we really have to zone by feet and not stories, right? And so if you're asking for a variance in stories, it's considered a less intense variance. And so just to make things uniform and to clean that up and to kind of get rid of those loopholes, we're going to just a 35-foot requirement. We're moving towards percentages for rear yards. We've talked about this in the prior phases, and we're looking at continuing that moving forward. We think it works really well on lot sizes that are different, deeper, narrower. Even on the average, it gets to the idea of what we want, which is that 30% or that 30 feet. The coverage as a response to some of the things that we heard back, we've lowered the lot coverage by 10%. We are going to be introducing a density standard. So right now, the R1 zone reads as a 1 and 2 family zone, and that's all that it reads as. If you are proposing anything more than 1 or 2 families, you are required to do a use variance. Introducing the density standard of 42 units an acre means that if you have a larger lot, your lot can handle more units and you wouldn't be required to get a use variance. Now you're building a building and with an envelope and a density that's proportionate to the lot size that you have. It reduces the number of zoning board applications, the number of things that you have to fight, and it creates a more, I think, logical answer to if a lot is oversized, can X amount of units actually fit? And it kind of takes a lot of that guesswork out. For the conditional uses that we are introducing to the R1 that are not there now, that's the adaptive reuse of the garage into a third unit. The extra density for the rehabilitation of the historic structures. We talked about that briefly in some of our other meetings, allowing some sites to go up to 75 units an acre. So on a regular 25 by 100 lot, that's 4 units, as long as that building is preserved and rehabilitated. And we are allowing for surface parking lots with EV stations, and these would be public lots. I think is this Matt or is this me? This is me. Some of the design standards, we heard a lot of what you had to say about design standards. I repeated in a lot of those meetings that we already have design standards, and we do. It's just whether or not they are necessarily enforced. We've talked a lot about how if somebody's proposing a 1 and 2 family building and that building doesn't require any variances, it will never see a planning or zoning board. It only goes to the zoning official and he signs off on it. Those design standards are there. We are reintroducing them in a way that makes them stronger, and that will help enforce them. Some of the things that we're doing, again, are reinforcing the porches, the windows, the roof character, but we're also introducing matching the floor height entry. Part of, I think, what kind of, I think, upsets is that what upsets the person who's looking at the block and the buildings are all over the place is that you have a floor entry that may be lower because it's the porch height. And now because you have the garage, you're really looking at things that are completely stretched up and your entry is all off. So it would be, you're lining up, your first floor would now be lining up with the neighborhood of with one of your neighbor's first floor. So you have that continuous line. Okay. I'm gonna let Matt take this one.
Okay, thank you, Tanya. Another recommendation we're doing that we talked about in a lot of our community meetings was responding to and acknowledging many of our apartment buildings on our residential side streets in R1. And when we looked at the built environment already, we saw that the median apartment building was 3 stories, 6 units on a lot that's only slightly bigger than our typical lot. So 33 feet by 100. But when we kind of condensed that look down and we said, okay, let's look at only lots 5,000 square feet or more, we saw that the average apartment building is 4 stories. It has 17 to 28 units at a density of 100 to 135 units per acre. And the lots were more along the lines of between 6,000 and 9,500 square feet. So the proposal that you will see when we release it on the 6th is it will allow for 4-story buildings on lots that are 7,500 square feet or more. And so some of the other items that we'll see here is we're considering a across the board 5-foot minimum front yard setback, minimum side yard setbacks, and because these buildings typically are much deeper than your smaller residential buildings, there is a slightly smaller rear yard setback that we're considering. Next slide, please. So here's just some examples of this, and you'll see these 4.5 story buildings abutting directly what is a typical 1-2 family home in Jersey City. So we have a couple examples here just to remind folks, or if this is new, to show some folks. And we even have some mixed use versions of this. This is an R1 block on Monticello Avenue, but also a 4-story R1 building. Another thing that we brought up, but maybe it hadn't been fully formed yet, and you'll see in the draft zoning, is something called small lot subdivisions, or I think what we've titled it going to title is Townhouse Lot Subdivision. So this has a lot of information on it, and we'll move to some photos here in a second. But what we're trying to do is at one end, allow for or recognize these apartment buildings. On the other end, we're trying to also recognize that there are smaller lots in the city that have been developed organically over time. And even in some older zoning ordinances, we recognize that and allowed it to happen. And so we're trying to reintroduce this concept. So the row on the top here is what maybe is like a more existing kind of condition. And then if someone were to use this, or even you'll see this around your neighborhood, you'll see a 50 by 100 lot get, especially on a corner, get turned, and then it becomes a series of smaller row homes or smaller detached homes on much shallower lots. So a 20 or 25 or even narrower by 50, 60, 70 feet. So we're trying to reintroduce this ability to diversify and create more variety of housing in the R1. And so let's go through some of these slides and we can talk about that. So here's down something in Greenville on Warner Avenue and Rose and Parnell Place. So there's a series of these 4 homes that are 20 to 23 feet wide by 63 to 54 feet. These are detached structures. We have another example. Here's another example on Chestnut and Henry Street of 20 by 47 feet deep homes. It's essentially a 50 by 100 lot. So this is you see this example all over the city, interspersed throughout the city on these corners. Very common way to deal with it. Another one. We even see some mixed use versions of this. This is on South Street and Webster. Even the next block over, you'll see has 61 foot deep lots by only 16 feet and some change wide. So this typology is throughout the city, and we're looking to add a provision that would allow that to happen. But we're also thinking about, well, this might not be just something to allow for corners. So we've written some standards that we think are very beneficial and actually will create a really nice housing typology that is on the smaller scale here. Next slide, please. So there was more limited examples that we could pull from and show you. But what happens when there's perhaps this is applied to a set of interior lots, so not on a corner. So this is an example. This is right on 14th Street. This is Radman Place. And this little grouping of homes fronts on not a street, it's just like a little walking alley. Next slide. And so what we would be looking to permit is that on a 50 by 100, you could turn your lots toward a walking alley that would be a public walking alley, and create like a series of smaller row homes or mews along that smaller right of way. And then if there was a neighbor to combine, then you would get something like this. And so we took some inspiration from different places in the city, as well as other cities in the country. But we have some other pictures here to show that are very similar to this condition, but not exactly to the letter of law what we're trying to produce. So this is Smith Street up by Bergen Square, where a small dead-end street ends with this, small little walking park setting where these homes just front on this type of condition. Another example is perhaps Highview Road, where you kind of have this kind of like English country village with these small knee walls, right? go right onto a street or alley. Another example would maybe be Boltwood if you're down in Lafayette. So we're looking to create these opportunities as well. We think that this adds to the variety and kind of vitality of residential areas. Next slide. So Tanya briefly spoke about some conditional uses. And so there was a lot of talk about garage commercial. That is not going to be proposed. That was definitely an outcome of the community meetings we had in the fall. And you will not be seeing that. What we did hear, though, was there was strong support for recognizing existing small businesses on some of these side streets and lessening the hurdles that they might undertake when there's turnover or opening a business in these spaces. So we showed this picture on the top in those presentations. And the one on the right, it's obviously a vacant storefront. And just to the left is an outcome of the policy we're looking to remove. So that is a former storefront that's now a residential apartment. And what we're looking to do is almost do the inverse, where we will be removing the ability to add a residential unit, even if it results in more than 2 units on that lot. And instead saying, well, if you can show photographic evidence that there was commercial at that location, you can put a commercial unit in that location. And so this is the proposed language for that. And down on below, we show the photo that we have on our records and from our tax cards back in 1938. And lastly, there was some groups that reached out to us, particularly in Ward C and D, regarding wanting stricter parking standards and perhaps increasing the prohibition against creating curb cuts in off-street parking. So what's being proposed is a standard that follows along those lines. And what we're saying is that in Ward C and D, on a lot that's less than 26 feet wide, parking is not prohibited, is not permitted, unless it is the predominant on that block or block front, actually. So there's a difference in nuance there. Block is both sides of the street. Block front is just one side of the street between the two cross streets. And we're saying that we're only counting parking that's in the principal structure, so garage parking, or lots that have a driveway that goes far beyond the front of the building. So like a side yard. And then for all other wards, we're saying that off-street parking is prohibited on interior lots with a lot with less than 25 feet. So if you have a lot that is 24 feet, 16 feet, 18, you are unable to create a curb cut there. We do allow for some more flexibility with corner lots because they just have so much more frontage on a street. But these are the rules that we are proposing, and you will see when we release the draft. Next slide. Tanya, this is you.
Okay, as promised, I'm going to walk you through a little bit of how to review and upload the documents. So on the city planning webpage, which is a great resource if you haven't been utilizing it already, we encourage everybody to use it because we have many things on there, including the interactive zoning map, which is a great tool. The easiest way to sign on to our page is jerseycity.gov/planning. Of course, you can always probably Google it. You go, you're going to scroll down, you'll see the highlighted section for master plan implementation, and you'll be focusing on the phase 2 draft comment. The there'll be an opportunity over here where it says published here under highlighted links. It'll take you to the open data portal. And in the open data portal, you will have both phase one, the corrective zoning that we've done before. You'll have access to all of the meetings that we've had leading up to this meeting. And then, of course, you'll have access to this meeting, and you will also have access to the document. If you're looking on the bottom, that's how you're going to be downloading the PDF or Word versions. This will come up as PDF.
Yeah, and I will be emailing it out to everyone that may have received an email that attended a past community meeting or walking tour. And you can certainly email us before the end of the week, and we'll loop you in that mass email.
Depending, yes, and so depending on how you like to make your notes, yes, no, that's absolutely right. Depending on how you like to make your notes, if you're Matt, you like to make 50 comments on PDF, and if you're me, you like to print things out and draw on them. Either way is fine. I have an example up here how to do sticky notes, because if you're like me, you don't even know what that means, and I had to figure out how to do it. If that's an easy way for you to keep order to your comments and questions. You can email myself or Matt. Our emails are on this page. I'm assuming the majority of you have them or have access to them or know somebody who has them. You can reach out to both or one or the other of us. The only thing that we ask is that when you are providing your comments, that you are clear on the page that the comment is, the section. So again, if you're commenting, if you can see before where it says section 345.6 definition. So it's on page XYZ under this section, and then your question is basically how we're asking you to send things to us. So I'm just, this is the time where we're going to read through a lot of the Q&A. I just kind of want to leave a lot of the milestone timeline up on the forward the screen. So I am not going to stop sharing the screen so we can continue to see those milestones in case that's a question for anybody. Liz, you want to shoot through some of these Q&As? We have, just so you know, myself, Tanya Marione, the planning director, Matt, who is supervising planner with us. We have Maggie O'Neill, Sarah Quinlan, who are our preservationists, and Liz Lorenzo, who's our community engagement specialist.
Great. So we'll start the questions.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. The first one was, can you email the list of R1 suggestions at the beginning of the meeting so we can take notes as we follow along?
Yep. So we'll be sending those out on the 6th.
Right. Is it fair to state that there are aspects of the master plan have not been updated?
Yes. Starting this year, we will be updating the historic preservation of the master plan, which I believe has not been updated since 2000. We are still in the beginning of data collection, so we will be reaching out probably, I'd say by spring, to start having some of those engagement sessions.
I believe also the Department of Infrastructure is looking to update the circulation element of the master plan as well. Is that right, Tanya? I believe so.
I think so. So that was the next question, which says, if so, which aspects have yet to be updated? You just answer that. This is just a statement. Without photo samples to reference all your zoning categories are confusing. So I know that there were some photos that were shown in the presentation. But
when we are sending out the Word document, we will also be showing a map, and the map will show all of the zoning changes for everybody to look at. I think that that might be helpful with the zoning categories.
okay. Does 35 feet height include AC units, etc.?
So there's still a height exemption for mechanicals. Matt, do you have any idea? Was it like 12? Not 12 feet sounds wrong.
It might be 10 feet for buildings that are of this size. But there are some step back So it's not seen from a public right of way. But they are allowed to go above the 35 feet. Yes.
Okay, will curb cut restoration be required for the garage conditional use?
Yes, we're looking at curb cut restoration, street tree planting, and in fact, we're also considering the creation of a robust kind of planter or knee wall to better ensure, especially if there's a setback, to better ensure that it will not be removed.
Do you have any photos of modern 4-story buildings next to single family ones?
We can certainly pull some. I do not have any with me at this time.
I think that we skipped a question. Sorry, Liz.
I did, yep, I'm going back to it, sorry. What density will be allowed for the 75,000 square foot lots?
42 units per acre.
Okay, how prevalent are those 4 stories really in the neighborhood? Once the opportunity presents itself to developers, it will just detract from the neighborhood.
They are prevalent.
I believe on
by
one
my
of our
definition.
slides. On
Yeah,
one of our
they're-
slides, it shows, yeah.
Apartment buildings make up at least 5% of the R1 district. So that's pretty significant.
Does zoning address when people put up gates that don't allow people access to the side of their homes?
I mean, we don't require that sideways be gated or fenced off. And that's the only answer I can think of for that question. I don't know if you're talking about an easement, which is something a little, not a little, but a lot different legally, that we wouldn't have anything to do with either.
Can an oversized lot be, I guess, be created by combining 2 lots?
Absolutely.
Correct.
It is assumed that the fire department has signed off on the MES type subdivisions. If not, how are you planning to reduce the risk of fire spread? Muse, M-E-W.
Oh, the Muse. Oh, yeah, sure. I'm sorry, I didn't see it. We can circle back with the fire marshal. I don't have an answer at this point.
What neighborhoods that the new master plan called out as potential historic districts are you protecting from inappropriate intrusions as they wait patiently for city planning to move the protective historical designation forward?
Mary or Sarah? Yeah.
Yeah, I can take this one. The land use element of the master plan that was recently redone called out specifically the neighborhood surrounding Sherman Place as a potential historic district. And recently at the December HPC meeting, as well as the January planning board meeting, we did add that neighborhood to the historic preservation element of the master plan. In the meantime, though, one of the recommendations that we're making here is to more broadly apply that R1A/F zoning that we're renaming RH1, which, you know, as Tanya said, is called a preservation light, discourages demolition, encourages retaining and restoring architectural elements. And we're more broadly applying that to areas that could be historic districts or that have historic fabric intact.
Okay. What was the garage commercial language that is not going to be proposed? What is the current state?
It is cobweb. It may indefinitely. But it was a recommendation in the master plan to consider looking at conversion of garages for commercial uses. So it was actually pretty broad. We were just coming up with some glazing requirements and some setback requirements. But I think because it was so unknown where it might occur, that it was not supported almost throughout all of our community meetings. So
Will the off-street parking only apply to new construction only or existing houses as well?
Primarily new. If there is an existing house that doesn't have parking, and it is within the ward C or D, and there was an intention to create parking, they would have to comply with the 26 feet. Retrofitting is always a little bit different, but if you are changing things that you're kind of grandfathered or allowed to have, because that's what you've had for a long time, you are subject to the new laws.
Okay. This is just a statement. Your department is one of the most engaging with public. Really appreciate it.
Your dog agrees.
Sorry, I have to pause.
Eliminating,
So yeah, we could say it there. Yeah, it
That
says
what we are?
eliminating a curb cut driveway in the front of house will allow to add an apartment in the basement. The answer to that is yes, but there are conditions. And those conditions would be, because we've already been a little bit burned by this, creating a knee wall so that there is no opportunity to create front yard parking, even though we've allowed for the reuse of the garage into a residential unit. Did I answer? You have another follow-up to that, Matt?
Well, I was just gonna say, a basement unit is limited by other things. There needs to be large enough windows for safe exit and so forth. So there might be other reasons beyond zoning that a basement unit would not be permitted.
Okay. Sorry. Okay. She said she couldn't see the slides. I'm assuming that she was able to now.
Well, it'll definitely be available, so after this.
Okay. Some exciting changes in here. Thank you for the hard work. How many people are in attendance?
Looks like 91.
Yeah, it looked a little higher earlier, but 91 right now.
Okay, the same question. How many are in the meeting? You just answered that. Is the plan to still only allow 2 units on R1A lots instead of applying that density standard?
That is correct. 3 units is allowed as a conditional use. That's a carryover from the R1F that is remaining in place. But but right now, I think in the working draft that we are putting the finishing touches to, there is no density standard proposed at this time.
Okay. Is the plan to still only, oh, no, sorry. What is the maximum permitted height of a house when it is peaked roof? And if it has a peaked roof attic, is it allowed to be allowed livable? You understand the word.
Habitable.
Sorry.
That one
Thank
always
you.
gets
I
me
was
too.
like, yes, and once you start, you're just no good. So, right.
It gets into. Tanya, I can take this.
ahead.
It's within the 35 feet. So if it's an attic, I'll look at the definition again, but I think we call that a story now. So if it has 3 stories below that attic, that is a 4th story. It would require a variance. If it is habitable, that would be dependent upon building code.
Yeah. I think too, when we were looking at the chart, 35 included the peak for the 3 stories. So we did take the higher end of that part. So 35 would include the peak.
Same question. How many are from the public or in this meeting?
Still 91.
Yep. Is there time for wards in addition to C and D to host community meeting with planning to look at what we can do to protect off-street parking in our wards as well?
We're definitely
Um,
open to meetings. I think that those recommendations came offline or at the community meetings that we have already hosted.
Okay.
Now, just to be clear, some of the things that we're writing in Ward C and D are not necessarily to protect off-street, it's to protect on-street.
All
Yeah.
right.
In many ways, the community members that are advocating for those see it as a way to also disincentivize or deter demolition.
Correct, yeah.
And then what is the height expectation for mechanicals, including the possibilities of a roof deck?
I believe that we are going to be proposing setbacks for roof decks from public right of way or lot lines that front on a public right of way. And there are those I don't believe are changing regarding mechanical. Those already exist, and you can email me if you want me to point you out the location where those are, but they're in 345-60 of the ordinance.
What is the density maximum for a 25 by 100 lot in the new R1 zone? It's unclear as it's already 2 dwellings, but the slide suggests an additional dwelling.
It's still 42 units an acre, and a 25 by 100 lot is still 2 units.
Public surface parking will be permitted.
Yes, as a conditional use. So there are requirements to that we require EV parking that's available to the public, and landscaping and coverage.
And all public parking lots in the city actually need to receive a license from the Division of Commerce to maintain and prove that they're going to be a commercial parking lot. So that will be a requirement as well.
How many ways are multifamilies now being legalized or encouraged in the R1? Am I correct in understanding that the AHO large lot building and applying the density standards to larger lots would all allow bigger or denser buildings?
So as I said multiple times, in the last couple of years, Jersey City does not and has not had single family zoning ever. The multifamily, the affordable housing overlay, we're not really talking about. This is just focusing on the R1 changes. There are multifamilies all over the city. I don't know, Matt, if you have anything extra to add to that.
I'm sorry, I did not hear the question. If we could be repeated, I don't know.
Okay, hold on. I have to pull it back up. It's all the way down.
Yeah, I lost our spot.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's
how
right
many
here.
ways are multifamilies now being legalized or encouraged in the R1? And am I correctly understanding that the AHO's large lot buildings and applying the density standard to larger lots would all allow bigger or denser buildings?
Yeah, I don't think I have anything to add there. What Tanya said.
Okay. Eliminating a curb cut driveway in front of a house will allow to add third apartment and basement.
Yes. A basement, let's be clear, basement is what I assume everybody's thinking of is it's fully off the ground, there's no underneath the grade. It's just the garage unit that we are more accustomed to seeing in the Bayonne boxes.
Okay, 1 second, sorry. What density will be allowed for 5,000 by 75, 5,000 to 7,500 lots?
42 units an acre.
Okay, you mentioned that the alley would be a public space. What do you mean by public? Because it looks like it's on private property. Do you mean public to those homeowners only?
No, I mean public. It might only be necessarily used by them because it won't necessarily go anywhere, but the subdivision would require the dedication of that space if they're an interior lot. Obviously, if they're a corner, then they wouldn't have to create that sort of walking alley condition.
If there was a commercial building next to my house in the 1970s, then it will be allowed now for a developer to build a 32-story building?
What?
If that building, wait, what?
32 unit building. It would require a,
No.
it would require. a
No, it
zoning
says if
board
there was a commercial
application.
building next to my home in the 1970s, then will it be allowed now for a developer to build a 32-story building?
I don't even know how to answer that question. The answer is that it would probably have to go to the zoning board.
What is the setback requirements for a new apartment building mid-block? Match predominantly setback?
We're proposing a minimum 5-foot setback on lots 7,500 square feet or more. If you're less than that, we're requiring you to match either of your neighbors.
Does the master plan have any requirements for facade materials or colors? Does the master plan require more open facade towards street in the case large plots are divided into small ones and the building's sides faces the street?
So as a part of the master plan, if you had the chance to look through it, there is a whole section on urban design, and it really does kind of talk about, I'd have to say more about building envelope than building design and aesthetics. We are introducing a stronger building design standard in this R1. Like I said, it has always been there before, but it has been something that would have been not a requirement, and that would have just needed a waiver. This would be different and it'll have strength to it. It does not go to that degree. Things that go to that degree are within the historic preservation zone.
Okay. Where can we go to find out what's being constructed in our area? Is there a direct link to finding out who's in building construction, et cetera?
You can create an account and you would sign on to something called the SDL. That's like Sam, David, Larry. And you can find information on permits pulled. You can also email us. We are in the process of releasing what we call development maps, which shows some developments or larger developments throughout the city on a series of maps that we published in PDF.
Are you planning to revamp design standards to assure new buildings blend in seamlessly within existing neighborhoods? Many of the new buildings are pretty ugly and uninspiring.
Yes, we just kind of answered that right before.
Is it possible to increase the number of parking spots required in a garage per unit / room?
Maybe we can have a more off table conversation about that with your wards.
Okay. Ultimately, is the 42 unit per acre standard allow for more or less density than the ratio currently in place?
It allows for 2 units per acre. I'm sorry, 2 units per lot on a standard 25 by 100 lot. So it's arguably the same as what is permitted now when we say on any lot, 2 units is permitted.
Okay. Thank you for a great session. Where can I find the current circulation element of the master plan? Was it traffic and circulation? I forgot the name.
You can go to the Jersey City Open Data Portal, type in circulation master plan, and you should be able to find your way there. Or you can email me and I will give you the link to that document.
What is the overall strategy for off-street parking? How many spaces must be on site to support multiple units?
I would have to say that that spaces don't support units. It's people that live in these units, and not every person needs a vehicle, a personal vehicle. So that's a difficult or leading kind of question. And I think it goes against a lot of the goals that we have in the master plan.
When you allow for the third unit, they will have to comply with fire code for sprinklers, et cetera, throughout the building?
The answer is yes. Where throughout the building is where I'm not sure. That is a building fire code question, because I've heard both things, where the sprinklers have to go throughout the building or the sprinkler just has to go into the third unit. So yes, it has to be updated to fire code and includes sprinklers. How much of the building, I'm not sure.
What if the curb cut does not lead to an additional public parking space if parking is on the opposite side of the street?
Yeah, I think I understand what you're saying here. I think Councilman Saleh has also brought up this question. We can workshop that more, but right now in our working draft, we don't have language that looks at that particular question.
If someone purchases multiple 25 by 100 lots, would they be allowed to put an apartment building in the middle of a block of a 1 and 2 family home?
I mean, our standard for 75 by 100 that allows 4 stories doesn't allow for increased density, allows for 42 units an acre. Yes, they would, if they had enough lots assembled in order to have the 7,500 square feet, they could do a 4-story 42 unit an acre building.
In addition to that, if they had 2 lots, they would be able to do a 4-plex.
Correct, yeah.
I believe the R-1A and the R-1F zones are created about 15 years ago to help preserve the look and feel of detached historic homes on larger lot sizes. By incorporating the R-1A and the R-1F zones into the new proposed RH1 zone with more lax zoning, how are these homes and lot sizes going to be preserved? Won't you now be able to potentially demolish these homes and subdivide the lots into the new proposed conforming lot size in the RH1? This seems to contradict the idea behind the R1A and the R1F zoning. I'm confused. If you could please explain that, that would be helpful.
I don't know, Maggie, if you want to take this.
Yeah, I will. So Chris, you'll see when we release the language, which, like as Matt said, we're fine tuning right now. The new RH1 zone, we really took the best parts of R1A and R1F, expanded on them and combined them into this new zone. The intentions of the zone, the RH1 zone, are going to be the same as the R1A and R1F, which is to preserve those larger lots with buildings that have historic fabric on them. Subdivision is not encouraged. In fact, it'll be very difficult to subdivide any of these. Demolition is not encouraged. And one of the improvements that we made on this new zone that R1A and R1F previously did not have is a set of design standards for that zone that will encourage retaining historic fabric, improving on historic fabric, new construction design standards, things like that, that R1A and R1F previously only had as part of a conditional use. So when we release language, you'll be able to dig into that a little bit deeper, but we believe that the new RH1 language is a really great improvement on R1A and R1F. Liz, I think you're muted.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Why is the city planning board allowing massive construction surrounding family homes? Is it possible for the planning board to organize construction so we won't be living surrounded by construction?
I assume this is more of like a timing of construction question.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's necessarily something that is a power that we have the ability to undertake.
I'm not even sure the building department does.
Yeah. It is more of a construction code official or building department question. But I think their powers are even limited.
Okay, what is the setback for rooftop decks?
I think we're looking at 10 feet.
Right
So-
now in that reference section of the ordinance that Matt referenced within historic districts, it's 10 feet. So I think that's what we're looking to replicate.
And obviously a roof deck, I think what the design standards were requiring, like in RH1 or RH2, there'll be matching of a strong design language to match peaked roofs or gabled roofs. So in those situations, there won't be decks.
If the peak of a current roof is over 35 feet, will that be grandfathered into a renovation of the current structure?
Don, did you answer that? I didn't hear.
Yes, yep.
Sorry, barking dog. Erica, I need to go back to her question. She's saying I meant on street.
Yeah, I understand. So
Okay,
like
gotcha.
on a one-way street where there's only parking on one side. Yeah, I think that's a great point and something for us to work on. But right now, the draft that will be released on Monday won't accommodate that type of situation. But we can talk further about that, Council Aide.
Okay. Can you provide an example of how removing the height table will affect density?
So it won't. I apologize if I'm not being clear. I'm having a really hard time switching back and forth because this would require me to bring up a web page. In the R1 right now, there was a chart that was created because when we were writing the zoning for the height, they had asked us to take into consideration that some of the floors might want to be more than 9 feet floor to ceiling. For example, you might want to have a 12-foot floor to ceiling height. And so when we were proposing that at the time, when city planning was proposing that at the time, the answer from the council was, can you give us a chart that shows all of these things? So it shows us if you're doing 12-story floor to ceiling height, what the highest building would look like. And by creating that chart, we inadvertently created a situation where 44 feet became the maximum height permitted for the zone period, although that was not the intention. The intention was really to provide that variety of height for residential housing. Unfortunately, that's not how the MLU law is written and interpreted. And so in order to get rid of all of that confusion, 35 feet was the height that we went back to, which does permit the peaked roof or the 3-story houses, which is also pretty consistent with a lot of the housing throughout Jersey City. Sometimes, actually, a lot of the housing in Jersey City might even be 2.5 stories. So that doesn't impact the density, it just impacts the height and the ability to ask for the extra story where it's not permitted.
Okay, I'm sorry if this was answered earlier, but when will this meeting be available to view online?
Not
We
a problem, yeah.
Yeah, hopefully very soon. We don't control when it gets published to YouTube, but we will send this video immediately to the person who does, and they're usually pretty good about putting it up in a couple days.
You have the master plan. How do you enforce it? They do what they want.
So, this is so we have the master plan, we write the zoning comes from the master plan, that's the goals and the visions. The zoning then becomes the law on how we see those goals and visions out. There's another thing happening at the same time, and that's your constitutional property right. And so you have the right per the New Jersey Constitution, per even the US Constitution, to request something on your property that is not within the law. Now, do we have to grant that? No. That's why it will go to the zoning board or the planning board, and either of those boards will view that application, and they will take into consideration the things and the goals and the visions that are written in the master plan, the intentions of that plan, and they will consider that in looking at your request to either upzone or change something on your lot. So there's a couple of things that we're, competing with when we're looking at these things. I don't know if that answers the question. It's just that it's a little bit more complicated than saying, these rules are, we hope that everybody follows the rules. They have the right to ask for more. We have the right to say no.
Will you allow 2-family homes with apartment behind garage to become a separate legal apartment?
Yeah, we so like in a Bayonne box style home is how I'm interpreting that. Yes, we are. I believe that it's permitted with the removal of the parking spot at this time. But it brings up a good point too, which wasn't discussed, but was widely supported into community meetings, was the concept of accessory dwelling units. So if there's like a detached garage or a back house or potential for a back house that is safe within fire code, we're also allowing for that potential, like a granny flat. Someone the other day called it a coachman's apartment, or in-law suite, but in a detached, smaller structure, or a carriage house.
What are the plans for Summit Avenue in the Heights?
On the map that we will be publishing, you'll see areas of Summit Ave being zoned RH1, which is that new combined R1A and R1F, and RH2, which is parts of potentially a future boundary of the Sherman Place Historic District, and the portions that are in the West Bergen East Lincoln Park. And this is just kind of spinning off of that question, but the portions of East Lincoln Park that are now R1 will be part of this RH2 zone.
I don't think mechanicals should be allowed on a lower roof deck. Will that be codified?
I believe that should remain. Mechanicals often means decarbonization, and we should be allowing for as many opportunities and places for that to happen. So like that means to me a heat pump. So if people are getting off of radiator heat, which is usually natural gas or oil, we should be allowing for that and not be discouraging it by telling exactly where it should go, and allowing more opportunity for it.
Is Webster going to be higher density? Why?
It is not. Right now, the R1W matches the zoning that was in place for the redevelopment plan. The suggestion to look at R2 is right now, honestly, it's just a suggestion. We've already reached out to the association in that area, and we will be working with them on to kind of finesse that. The proposal really is that the density will match the existing.
When do you expect the development maps to be ready?
Very soon. There's another staff member in office doing the work on it, so I do not want to overpromise when it's not my responsibility, but very soon. If you want to email me, Lynn, you can do so, and I'll put you on a list to send them out. when they are available.
Can you please provide a synopsis of plans for Ward F specifically?
So that's only, it's a little bit difficult to do that because R1 is for the entire city, which is a little bit hard to kind of just pinpoint the things that are happening for Ward F specifically. I think Felicia, please email myself or Matt, and we can have more pointed conversations with you.
Looks great, thank you. The plan encourages and allows densification of the area. Are there sufficient parks and green areas for increased population, referring to the demolition of Oak Street Park a few months ago?
Oak Street Park is a Green Acres site. That's alarming. I'll have to go by and take a look.
Yeah.
But we also, we can take another look at our open space and recreation master plan. And the major outcome, if I remember correctly, was that we might be under the averages compared to some other cities, but it's not necessarily the deficit that's a problem. It's the maintenance of our open space. So we have to maintain what we already have better, was one of the major recommendations that came out of that element. So not necessarily adding, which we are trying to do, like the courthouse park, but it is maintaining.
Is the infrastructure of the city have to be infrastructure of the city have to be updated to support this new plan without the advent of new build outs?
So the infrastructure of the city has to be updated, period. Now, yesterday, and the MUA is in the process of doing that. I'm sure you've noticed that a lot of the streets are being dug up. And so that is being kind of undertaken by a separate agency, the Municipal Utilities Authority. And they will always have to meet the demands that we put on the system.
Will anyone be elaborating on why eliminating park minimums leads to better, more walkable cities? I think there's a lot of misinformation around this.
I always think a great example of this is a great example for this for me, right, is that when my kid is going down the street and I just want them to, take their scooter down the sidewalk, or I want them to go walk down to the boulevard to get something, to go to one of the stores. Most of the time what I'm yelling out at the street is watch for the driveway, watch for that driveway, watch for that. I don't know if there's like a better example of sometimes how creating the requirement for parking on site in a garage where your only option is to back out in a city where we don't have like 100 by 100 lots. So there's clear driveways where there's great kind of just views for people to come out when they're driving, to be safe of the cars that are coming from the other way, or the people that are walking on that sidewalk. We've got 25 by 100 lots, and sometimes when the garage is there, it takes up the entire frontage. And those cars are blocking sideways. They're making it not safe for pedestrians to move down and up those sidewalks. They're creating situations where you're just driving. Now you're creating some more conflict with the cars. That's a minuscule example of, I think, why, kind of restricting parking and protecting on-street parking is a little bit more answer to that. There's larger scale conversations to that, but that's usually the thing that comes to my head.
As mentioned about parking, what is the spirit of the new code and how does this affect parking?
Right, so there was the two standards that we showed for Ward C and D. There's a stricter standard where off-street parking is only permitted if you have a lot that is 26 feet or more wide. And in Jersey City, the standard lot width is 25 feet. So there may be a lot of properties that would impact. For the remainder of the city, the prohibition is just lots less than 25 feet wide. So it may impact those areas very little. Right now in the R1, and we're not going to be changing this, off-street parking is not required until you have a lot that's 50 feet wide or more. And that's not being proposed to change. So some parking is something that's in demand. It is something that a lot of the new construction doesn't want to be built without. The incentives are there to create parking. And that's those incentives is some of the community doesn't wants to remove. And in other areas, it will remain an incentive.
Will these public parking lots have to operate on hourly basis only? Will they need to be attended? What about offering monthly parking spots to residents in the area?
That's the idea. Yes. Whether or not I don't think we're going to put in any standards about operation. So whether or not they need to be attended will be up to that owner or an operator. Yeah.
What is being done within the master plan to reduce dependence on motor vehicles and reduce greenhouse gas emissions?
Well, going back to we aren't requiring parking off street. It is where permitted, it will be upon the property owner or the developer to choose to include that. So that is one way that we are trying to reduce greenhouse gas emissions through the use or ownership of private automobiles.
This is Erica clarifying. I meant on street with regards to a plan to save on street parking.
So let me jump into this one just because this is kind of a debate that was going back between in our office, right? So we did have the request from Ward C and D, or mainly from Ward D, to really kind of do this 26 limit, preserving on-street parking. We tried to be a little bit more conservative for the wards that maybe didn't have as immediate access to public transit as, G or C does. And so Ward F and Ward A, even though of course a lot of Ward F is just running along the light rail line, does have more access. So there are things that we can continue to look at. We can talk about that offline. We just wanted to be sensitive to some of the areas that were more or less a little bit more transit deserts.
These two families with apartments behind garage, will this require a fire escape and sprinkler system as current 3-family properties?
As if they become updated and legalized, it would require a sprinkler system. As it exists right now, they're operating illegally and they're not to code.
Yeah, a sprinkler, and I think to be specific, a sprinkler system in that new unit is how the building department regulates that and requires it.
Okay, yeah, I wasn't sure.
How does the density of 42 units per acre compare to density allowed in historical district in Jersey City?
Significantly lower. What is it, 75 units per acre in the H
Yeah, so
zone?
the downtown historic district, which are all zoned H, are 75 units to the acre. The West Bergen East Lincoln Park Historic District is an overlay district, so it retained its zoning underneath that overlay. So that zone varies between existing R1A, R1F, R1 and R3. So the 42 units an acre is lower, but it's not necessarily any different than the vast majority of West Bergen as it is.
When a builder makes a 4-story building in a res zone 2, why not require a setback on the 4th floor?
I mean, I think it's a good comment, a good point. We can add it to the comments and we can certainly see how much feedback we get about that and keep looking at it. More than happy to keep looking at it.
I live in the R1 zone. This is an apartment. There is an apartment building on one side of me and a double vacant lot on the opposite side. Will developers be allowed to sandwich me in with another apartment building?
It's just a little bit too difficult to answer that question without a little bit more details. Carol, please email me, tanya.m@jcnj.org.
Can we build accessory building dwellings in R2?
Yes. I believe that's in there. I can double check, Mary. I believe I have your emails.
So 25 by 100 Bayonne boxes with an illegal unit behind garage can be legalized if parking is removed?
Yep, I think that would do two great things. One, it would restore on-street parking, and two, it would provide an up-to-date to code safer unit.
How many units will be acceptable in a 25 by 100 lot?
Two.
Perhaps off topic, but can you hold a Bayonne box design competition?
I-
Maybe in the summer.
There, we will have no gifts to give away, right? I don't know if that's in our budget this year, Tanya. But I think it's a fantastic idea. It just
Although if you're lucky, we can have our historic preservation team do a history of the Bayonne
Yeah.
boxes.
yeah, we
We
could
can.
you know what? I would we have our citizen planner course, and we could do a Bayonne box best of meeting. And we would love to do that. And I think that we would rather be a maybe a judge than the host if there is a competition.
What is considered East Lincoln Park?
That's probably a reference to the historic district that I've mentioned like 4 times now. So if it is, the West Bergen East Lincoln Park is a historic district. The boundaries are roughly Montgomery to the north, Bergen to the east, Communipaw to the south, West Side Ave to the west. So in this case, they're referring to East Lincoln Park as the section of that historic district that is to the east of Lincoln Park.
So the behind garage apartment would require removing parking and closing the garage. Seems odd in areas that parking is crucial.
Again, this seems to be like an ongoing conversation. Just why don't you shoot us an email? We're always more than happy to talk offline about these things. I don't want to kind of just belabor everybody's night on the same thing over and over.
Why is the off-street parking you discussed with the Ward C and D groups not going to be applied to all of Jersey City? Or have I misunderstood?
It will not be. Right now, we're proposing it for not to be applied to Jersey City. Just like I'm saying, again, let's have this conversation offline. It seems like a hot topic. It seems like more people want that, and that's great. So the more people that I think ask for it and talk about it, I think we should start looking about expanding it.
What will be the process and timing for public? Oh, I'm so sorry.
Next question. So the timing for public comment.
Yes.
March 10th is the soft deadline for comments on this R1 after we're going to publish this on Monday.
Okay. You mentioned that parking is required on lots 50 feet wide or more. Did you mean to say parking is required for lots greater than 50 feet only?
That's correct. Right now in the R1, there's a minimum parking requirement that only kicks in when the lot is greater than 50 feet.
How can we incentivize commercial property owners to lease out their commercial space rather than hold them vacant? Vacant storefronts create situation areas that are ripe for crime and unsavory activity. See Monticello Avenue between Fairmont and Communipaw.
Yeah, so in respect to the topic really for tonight, R1. We think that some of the language we showed here in the presentation is going to lessen those hurdles or hoops to opening up businesses. So maybe there might be some more bureaucratic reasons why they're left vacant. With regards to Monticello Avenue, the zoning is in place. So it is an ownership issue, and it's a hard one. I don't know if I can unpack that. But I sympathize with that question and think about it myself.
Parking in Jersey City is an exact example of tragedy of the commons. Large-scale developers do not want to include parking as it reduces profits. While this may seem in conclusion, may seem with reduction of greenhouse.
Confluence, I think,
Is that okay?
or
Confluence.
incongruous.
With reduction of greenhouse gases, it significantly decreases the quality of life for the population. Thus, through a lack of on-street parking and bad behavior on the part of residents looking for parking.
Okay.
I don't think that's a question.
I guess that, to me, it sounds like a comment, not necessarily.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It doesn't. Okay, to add to Lynn Burke's question earlier about walkable cities and Tanya's response, eliminating parking minimums does not address the amount of driveways on a block. One car can use the same parking driveway as 50. It is more about density and how many possible cars are on the street. Question, will homeowners with apartments behind garage pay additional taxes?
Yes.
Correct.
Will the PowerPoint from today about R1s be available to receive, download, to reread?
It will be. It will be available on our website and of course on the portal. And not just this PowerPoint, but this presentation.
Thank you all for your time. Good night.
Good night.
Night.
Who can we contact for specifics regarding the behind garage unit? There will be no answer. There was no answer to question of fire escape and sprinkler system mentioned said the first floor would have been told is for the entire building.
You can email us. You can email myself or Matt.
Thank you for the thought put into improving the R1 zones. You guys have been great. You guys have put a great effort into this. An apartment building was proposed on Arlington Avenue on a lot larger than 7,500 square feet, where the community came together to negotiate that it not exceed 3 stories. The project was approved at 3 floors, but has not been built out yet. Will this proposed change to allow apartment buildings on 7,500 square feet or larger lots allow the developer of the site on Arlington Avenue to now add a 4th floor? There was another project that was proposed on Ocean Ave near Union Street on a lot over 7,500 square feet. There was about 20 homes. The community came together to oppose that one as well, wanting it to be no more than 3 stories. That project was not approved by the zoning board because of community opposition. Will staff consider reducing the proposal to allow 3-story apartment buildings instead of 4?
I think the best answer to that is to provide the comments and your concerns and the feedback, and we will certainly be reviewing everybody's feedback.
I am noticing all these new buildings with parking garages are hardly any of the residents of those buildings are parking there because it's too expensive. Why is more being allowed to be built?
Hang on, can you?
Yeah, I missed that one, or can you read it again? It disappeared.
Yep. I am noticing all these new buildings with parking garages and hardly any of the residents of these buildings are parking there because it's too expensive. Why is more being allowed to be built?
It seems like a layered question about apartment buildings and their on-site parking. Frank and Laura, you've asked a couple of good questions tonight. If you don't mind, please email me at tanyam@jcnj.org and we can have a conversation online kind of go through some of the stuff that you're asking about. My feeling is you're asking about bigger things than just a 1 and 2 family zone. So I'd be more than happy to talk to you offline.
You keep saying 2 units max for a 25 by 100 lot, but also allowing a 3rd unit if garage is removed.
Correct. That was it was a direct recommendation in the master plan that came out of their extensive surveying, community meeting effort that was done over 2 years.
Yeah, and it's a little bit different, right? Because 42 units an acre permits 2 units. That's as of right. The 3rd unit, removing the garage and replacing it with a residential, is a conditional use. No, it's not an as of right. It's a conditional permission.
I would love a Bayonne box history lesson.
Me too.
You mentioned removing parking on behind home apartments, but what if this is a no parking, this is a no parking street? It would not increase parking.
Definitely, again, some of those things that we have had come up, even from the councilman. Please email us and write those on the comments, and we can take a better look at some of these things.
Okay. You said that making a garage a legal apartment would do 2 things, creating a parking spot and making the garage to code. Are people currently renting out their garages?
So one of the largest violations in Jersey City was the illegal 3rd unit. So people are absolutely currently renting out their garages to residential illegal units. Are they renting them out for cars? That I don't know.
For a Bayonne box where garage is removed, would it be possible to retain a portion of the garage as a storage unit, or would that ground floor apartment need to be extended to the facade?
I'm not sure we've looked at it in that much depth, to be honest. So provide that comment or provide clarity in your comments. Be happy to see them.
That was
Alright.
all the questions.
It looks like we came to the end. I just want to thank everybody for taking their night to come on and to do this, to hear us give our presentation. Again, please remember.
We have
Monday-
one more question.
Okay.
And then
There's a clear concern with density. Is there anything within the power of the city plan to address this?
We believe we are addressing it. For some of the density standards that we're adding. But, please go ahead, go look through some of the changes in the R1 if you have other suggestions to the density. And hey, look, density is not that easy of a thing to understand, even for us. Sometimes we have to write things on papers to figure out how many units that means and what that looks like. So if you do have confusion, understanding what 42 units an acre on a lot looks like, give us a call and we will happily walk you through what that is. Yeah, so let's call it.
Yep, the last ones are just thank
know-
yous.
Good, thank you. So thank you. Thank you for taking your Wednesday night to be with us. Again, this is just an attempt to really kind of highlight and get you thinking about things when you look at the document and how to look for the things and then how to comment on them and to give us feedback. We do want you to know that we are definitely willing to talk to you, to answer your questions offline, and we are happy to host, we're not going to host them. We will attend your meetings if you would like us to talk about things more specifically. And that's it. So have a great night. Thank you again. I don't know if any of my colleagues have anything else to add. All right,
Thank you.
great.
Thank you all.
Thanks again.
Good night.